Hello students, welcome back. And here I am back with another lecture. And today's lecture is called Analysis of 5 films using sociological concepts. Now if time permits, of course, I will discuss more than 5 films. Once again, today's lecture I have also given it a particular name. And this name is Sociology on Film. The reason being, and let me start a little early, that is, in post-war situations after World War II, Hollywood suddenly was kind of churning out a lot of films which were dealing with social problem, often referred as the problem films. And these films were tackling issues such as racism, gender, crime, mental illness, drug abuse, and so on and so forth. In this time period, these films, referred as problem films, brought other aspects of sociology, such as what I discussed right now, gender, such as gender, race, and so on and so forth, into the ambit of cinema, and therefore can be referred as, or can be discussed under the broad framework of sociology on film. However, I am not discussing today an immediate post-war film and rather discussing a favorite film of mine. In fact, it is it's a remarkable film, and I propose that all of you after this lecture should go ahead and watch the film, particularly because today I'm going to also discuss the film. So before I begin, a discussion on Taxi Driver, a 1976 American drama directed by Martin Scorsese and written by, once again, my very favorite writer, Paul Schrader, and starring Robert De Niro and Jodie Foster, and so on and so forth. So before I begin talking about this film, you go ahead and watch the trailer of this film.
272. Second call, 404 Hamilton, 417. 1 item 5. Alfano, 448.
De Niro.
4 and 5.
In Bang the Drum Slowly, the critics called him a brilliant new talent. After Mean Streets, they said he was a genius. For his performance in The Godfather Part 2, they gave him the Academy Award.
Come on, man. Just get me out of here, all right?
Now, Robert De Niro creates a terrifying portrait of life on the edge of madness.
Tabby, just forget about this. It's nothing.
Taxi Driver, a film by Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, people do anything in front of a taxi driver. I mean, anything. People too cheap to rent a hotel room.
Oh, driver, hurry up, will you?
People want to embarrass you. It's like you're not even there. It's like, like a taxi driver doesn't even exist.
This city here is like an open sewer, It's full of filth and scum.
I think I know what you mean, Travis. But it's not going to be easy.
How do you guys get to be a Secret Service man?
What?
I was just curious, because I thought maybe I'd make a good one.
Hope you liked the trailer. Now, this particular film is about the character called Travis Bickle. Who is Travis Bickle? A post-war veteran, in the sense that he's a war veteran, and right now he's feeling a lot of anxiety. So this film is about his anxiety, his loneliness, in fact his mental health issues, and so on and so forth. He works day and night in a taxi, like he drives the taxi throughout the day and night, and his mental state is rapidly deteriorating throughout the film. Now, I'm not going into the detailed plot, but the plot basically is all about this character, Travis Bickle, who is almost, he becomes the outsider of the society, right? In the sense that he first approaches a girl called Betsy, right, another character in the film, a white blonde girl who kind of refuses him. After that, he decides that he will kind of shoot a presidential candidate, and he gets himself a very famous mohawk haircut, and so on and so forth. So he's completely determined to kind of save the world. So in that sense, by kind of killing this presidential candidate, and then lastly, he also attempts to save a prostitute by almost becoming his guardian. So he does a series of things in the course of the film with the idea of being purposeful, right? So he wants some sort of after the war he kind of loses a sense of purpose, for living, and that's what he's continuously kind of looking for, right? And he's always, as I said, he's always behind that yellow cab, the quintessential very image of taxi driver, and he's kind of looking around and looking around at the filth and the dirt of the New York City. Now, if you remember, during this particular period of time, that is early, early 19 in the 1970s, particularly early late 1970s. New York itself was not the kind of New York you are aware of today. The city workers, like the kind of sewage workers and so on, went on a strike. As a result, the city was not clean enough, and that was the literal expression. But Travis kind of constantly talks about the filth, the scum, and so on and so forth. In fact, when Betsy refuses him to be his romantic partner, he says, "You are one of them," in the sense you add to the scum of the city, right? So it's about his disdain. It's about his, his trauma, which he's dealing with. But interestingly, the reason I'm talking about this film in the lecture called Sociology of Film is because the film is not just about Travis. It's not, on one level, it's of course it's the story of this fictitious character called Travis Bickle, but on another sense of it, on another level, it's also about the generation, in general, who had a sense of the generation which kind of got lost in the post-war situation, right? So his paranoia, his loneliness, kind of defines the loneliness or the kind of the loneliness of the entire generation. Another reason I particularly spoke about the film is because the way deals with the issue of racism. Travis Bickle himself is a racist character, and the racism is not just about what he says or what he does in the course of the plot of the film, but simply the way he looks at people, right? So he's driving, he's kind of in his taxi, and the way he looks at black people around him, that's a kind of, that immediately kind of, when you watch the film, it becomes very clear that the film kind of deals with the issue of racism. Through Travis, though Travis never literally says or does things which are very racist, right? Beside using a word called spook and so on and so forth for black people, but his racism is clear from the way he looks at black people. The point that I was just mentioning, Travis notices black men everywhere, right? Revealing a deep-seated fear and hatred of black men in particular. The constant shot of group of black people and black men, that is when he's driving through his taxi, reveals his hatred for this particular community. Black people are often shot in slow motion in the film, showing that Travis's gaze are lingering on to them, right? He's fascinated with what he hates. And it's not just him, actually. In the film, there are two more instances. One where he's sitting with a group of taxi driver and he's particularly not comfortable with sitting with one of the person who is black. So that's another instance. Or, the instance when some random men came and sat into his taxi and was kind of, he asked him to drive to his home, and then he tells him that his wife is kind of having an affair with another, a nigger, so to say. So he uses the word nigger. So, these are instances where it's a shared, and then this kind of, this scene clearly makes it a point that it's not just him, right? It's rather other people who are also racist in their nature. So that kind of, gives us to sort of legibility or rather it gives a sort of credibility to Travis's racist character, right? Another person another shooting case, where he goes into a shop and he kills a group of black people who were kind of, the very fact that black people were shown in the film stealing things, and then Travis kind of manages to shoot them, and then the shop owner says, you don't forget about it, I'll take care of it. Another character in the film who shows his disdain, who shows his kind of, hatred for the black community. So such racist undertones are there throughout the film via Travis as a character as well as through the other characters of the film, right? So on one level, it's a fascinating film, of course, but in another sense of it, this is also a film which talks about racism in general, right? Thus bringing the concepts such as racism into the ambit of cinema. So this was a 1976 American film, but I would like to also talk about something contemporary, right? And when I was preparing this lecture, another film which came immediately to my mind, which can be discussed under the ambit of sociology of film, is a very contemporary film, 2019 film called Parasite. Right? All of you remember, it was a remarkable film. And this particular film called Parasite discusses concepts like social class, class hegemony and conflict, social inequality, particularly just like Taxi Driver was bringing racism, was inherently about racism. Parasite is inherently about class, right? And once again, before we talk about the film, I want you to go ahead and watch the trailer of the film.
뭐야, 소독해? 창문 닫아.
나도 봐. 공짜로 집안에 소독도 하고.
부모님 얼굴도 뵙고 좋더라, 건강들 하시고.
일거리가 없으셔도.
네가 내 대신 얘 과외 선생님 좀 해줘라, 영어.
대학생인 척하라는 거야?
구라를 좀 치지 뭐.
넌 이 좋은 실력으로 왜 미대는 맨날 떨어지냐?
아이씨, 죽을래.
저는 이게 위조나 범죄라고 생각하지 않아요.
참으로 시의적절하다. 부자들이 원래 참 잘 속아.
사모님이 뭐랄까.
풀타임으로 수업 어떻게 하시는지. Is it okay with you? 우리 다송이는 완전 예술가 재질인데.
침팬지를 그린 거죠?
자화상이에요.
역시.
그동안 미술쌤도 여러 명 바꿔가면서 해봤는데요.
제가 사람 하나가 휙 하고 떠올랐는데.
아, 잠깐. 제시카, 외동딸, 일리노이, 시카고. 과선배는 김치모, 그는 이사촌.
부자인데 착하다니까.
진짜 니가 착한 거지.
Yes, students. Hope you liked and enjoyed the trailer of the film. Another fantastic film. Now, greed and class discrimination threatens the newly formed symbiotic relationship between the wealthy Park family and the Kim clan, that is the one who are resourceful and wealthy, that's the Park family, and the destitutes, that's the Kim clan or the Kim family, right? So Parasite is a 2019 South Korean film, as we all know, directed by the very famous Bong Joon Ho. The film follows a poor family who schemes to become employed by a wealthy family, right? And infiltrate, one by one, they kind of infiltrate the household by posing as unrelated, very highly qualified individuals. So that's inherently the summary or the plot of the film is very simple. So this particular family, that is the Kim family, one by one, they kind of enter the Park family, and of course they enter as people who don't know each other, right? They disguise, they don't mention that it's one family, and one by one these people enter the family, and they kind of act like very qualified people and so on and so forth. So for example, the son enters as a tutor, right? The mother enters as a household help, the father enters as a driver, and so on and so forth. Now, this particular film is all about class, nothing else. Class is the primary target of social commentary. So the film is a social commentary on class, just like just like the previous film we were discussing, Taxi Driver was a social commentary, was commenting on racism. This film comments particularly about class. And every element of the film, and when I say every element, is not just about the plot, it's also about how individual frames are choreographed, right? Or certain props used in the film, such as the scholar's stone. So scholar's stone is these people were really poor. That is the Kim clan. The other side of the family were very, very poor, and they were barely making it. And this point of time, the son of the family, he had a friend, and he comes with a particular stone, a very unusual gift, and gives it to this particular family and says that that if you have that, this will bring you luck, right? And that kind of begins the story where and the same guy who gives him this particular rock also talks about the tuition, that he can become a tutor and so on, and that's where the story begins. Now, be it the props or everything, literally the scene themselves, or the way the shots are choreographed, everything talks about the class. So I will also talk about a few scenes in the film, right? So for example, the film constantly talks about a stench. So these people were now disguised as well-skilled people, right? Whereas the Park family continuously talks about a particular smell. Now, this smell, often talks about the underlying, the rottenness or the smell of the people who do not belong to a privileged class, right? Or the contrast itself. Early on in the film, we see this particular family, that is Kim family, is barely living in the basement, and they use kind of, they don't even have Wi-Fi, so they use the public Wi-Fi and somehow, and so on and so forth. So all of these is very contrasting in nature. Whereas the Park family is, for the son, they kind of hire a therapist and so on and so forth. So the contrast between these two categories or these two classes are very, very strong in the film. Striking architecture, designer choices of the Park family, very contrasting to the other family. Next, we are going to talk about Hindi films, and I have picked up two films for you. One, a 2014 film called PK. You must be thinking, what am I going to talk about this mainstream Bollywood cinema? But this particular film also talks about the concepts such as religion, fashion, superstition, godmen, charismatic authorities, religious symbols, and so on and so forth. If you haven't seen the film, please go ahead and watch the film. The film begins by tackling four very important issues: religious conflicts between Hindus and Muslims, inter-nation hostility between India and Pakistan, declaration of gurus, and superstition. I'm not going into the rest of the plot, but of course, when you watch the film, it becomes very clear, self-explanatory, how, PK, of course, the very famous role played by Amir Khan, he is an alien, so he understands some of the concepts, but he kind of gets all, he never understands the concepts of religion and gender and so on and so forth. Now, before we talk about the next film concern, I want you to answer one, I want you to revisit the previous film, that is Parasite. And I want to ask you that the film was released from which country? Was the film South Korean? Was it North Korean? Was it Japan? Was it released, is it from Japan or is it from China? The answer is that Parasite is a South Korean film. Now, let's talk about a contemporary film. And the film is available in one of the OTT platforms, and the name of the film is The Great Indian Kitchen. Now, Great Indian Kitchen talks about, again, one very important issue, that is gender, right? The film basically shows two women, that is the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, who are both housewives who are both working at home at that point of time. Particularly, the daughter-in-law have not been allowed to work outside, whereas the husband, that is, teaches sociology in school or college, something of that sort. And these women in the house are working throughout the day and night, at home, whereas the men in the house do absolutely nothing, right? And when I say absolutely nothing, this goes into bizarre levels. So, for example, in the lunch table or the dinner table, men eat and then they kind of throw away, the food all over the table, and the leftovers are spread in the table, and then the women of the household come and clean the table, right? Also, very well curated shots. So there's not too much dialogue in the film, and rather we constantly see cutting of the vegetables or the vegetables being fried or chopped and so on and so forth. So these women working, so there are just shots of women working, and whereas the men are more involving themselves in more recreational activities, such as yoga. They're doing yoga, or they're just sitting idle. At some point, there's also a particular scene where one of the women comes with a toothpaste, and she's kind of giving the toothpaste into the brush of one of the men. So the man is so lazy that he can't even brush on his own. So the film goes into it's a very simple film. I mean, it's just numerous shots of women working in their own household, but the film deeply talks about the problem related to that. Of course, it goes on later and talks about marital sex, where the women are forced into sex even against their wishes, and so on and so forth. So it even crosses, it's not just about cooking and cleaning, but it goes on and talk about these issues, and particularly it revolves how patriarchy is very much ingrained in so many Indian household, right? And I would like to also talk about the sound design of the film. When we are looking at women, or when the film showcases women, we constantly hear the noise of chopping and cutting and the kitchen sound and so on and so forth. So the sound effects is designed in that manner. Whereas when we kind of see shots of men, then it's rather, we don't hear such noises. It's not noisy, it's calm. So it's, once again, just like Parasite, as I was discussing the same. It's not just about, the dialogues in the film, but it's also about shot taking, or the way the shots are choreographed, or sound design, as a matter of fact, where ideas such as patriarchy, gender roles, for this particular film, gender inequality or patriarchy has been highlighted in the course of the film. Of course, the film ends in a very optimistic note. Of course, it also, I left one thing, it also talks about that the only time when the women are relieved from their work is basically when they are menstruating, right? So they're treated as outcast in their home when they are menstruating, and so on and so forth. So these issues are very important social issues, right? But using these social issues are being discussed using the tool of cinema. The film ends, of course, with a very optimistic note when the daughter-in-law gives garbage water, gives dirty water, serves dirty water to the father-in-law and the husband, and then leaves the household to finally earn a living of her own and lead a free life. I want you to revisit the first film once again. That is the film called Taxi Driver. And I want to ask you, who directed the film Taxi Driver? Was it Jean-Luc Godard? Was it Amir Khan? Was it Martin Scorsese? Or none of the above? The answer is, of course, Martin Scorsese. On that note, I hope this lecture was fruitful and you could revisit all of these films at your leisure. Thank you.